Today I want to do three things with this video. First of all, I'm going to introduce a new scale to my channel, which is the 1/43rd scale. Now I started this hobby collecting only 1/24 scale model cars, telling myself that I would never get into the other ones. But the reason I ended up doing so is because I kept coming across deals that were too good to pass up. Which brings us to this model, and with it, the second highlight to this channel, namely the introduction of a truly high-end brand, AUTOart. Which brings us full circle back to point 3, and that is the theme of this channel. That has been the theme of this channel for a while, which is affordable diecast model cars. Now, AUTOart 143s are, in terms of price, all over the place, from 20 euros to over 100, depending on the model you're looking for. But this one I managed to find for just 18 euros off a diecast model car website called Modellissimo. And I'm going to put the link in the description below. And you got to agree that an AUTOart for this price, even if it is just 143, is still a very good deal. Especially for an exotic car. Looks a bit like a Lamborghini Countach LP400. You know, the one without the $5,000 spoiler, doesn't it? But it isn't. It's not a Corvette either. Not a Pontiac Fiero, not a BMW M1. It's a Lotus. Yep, you heard right. A Lotus. Let me just emphasize this once again. When you think of Lotus cars, you usually think cute little green cars with rounded edges and yellow accenting, right? Okay, maybe the silver Exige comes to mind, which, interestingly, later became the body for the Hennessy Venom GT, but it still has its curves. So this car is the exact opposite of what many people associate Lotus with, and yet it's a very famous Lotus car. From the controversial era of boxy cars that dominated the mid-70s to the mid-90s, there were some legends that became posters adorning many children's bedrooms, like the Lamborghini Countach. And here's a car that at first glance gets mistaken for the Countach, especially because it looks nothing like the Lotus cars made today. And this car is the Lotus Esprit from the Colin Chapman era. The Esprit has been in many movies like Pretty Woman, Basic Instinct, as well as in 2 James Bond movies, the original Esprit in The Spy Who Loved Me, while this Turbo Esprit was in For Your Eyes Only. The Lotus Esprit was designed by the legendary Giorgetto Giugiaro, who was also responsible for the looks of other timeless classics, like the original Maserati Ghibli, the De Tomaso Mangusta, the famous DeLorean DMC-12, and even daily drivers like the Mark I Volkswagen Golf. I say legendary because in 1999, Giugiaro was crowned Car Designer of the Century. Now he wanted to name this car Kiwi, but since all Lotus cars start with an E, it became the Esprit. Officially, this car is called the Turbo Esprit, but people also call it the other way around, the Lotus Esprit Turbo, and as the name suggests, it isn't naturally aspirated, but has a turbocharger. Now, what makes the Lotus Esprit so appealing is that, just like this diecast model by AUTOart, even in real life, it is an affordable mid-engine exotic car. So why is it affordable? This is where you might notice I've been saying exotic car the whole time. I wouldn't call it supercar, because that would put it in the same category as Ferrari road cars, like the 348, the 355, 360, the Lamborghini Gallardo, etc. And the Esprit, performance-wise, can't keep up with any of them. I'm comparing it to so many cars because the Lotus Esprit has had a long production run spanning 28 years, from 1976 to 2004, and they always kept improving things, including making the engine more powerful. But one thing that sets Lotus apart from all the other exotic car manufacturers is their design philosophy, which has always been about weight reduction. For example, the first of its kind, the Lotus Esprit S1 from the 1970s, had a weight of only 900 kilograms, which is crazy. This turbo is in real life 1150 kilograms, but still around 200 kilos lighter than any of the aforementioned Ferraris. This car is in a color that Lotus calls Phantom Black. So one unfortunate fact that most 143 scale cars have in common is that nothing opens on them. But on the other hand, what you do get in this scale, in many cases, is this hard plastic shell, which means your car is protected from dust at all times. And for 18 euros, the fact that you don't just get the model car, but also this case, means it's a really fantastic deal for your money. Another interesting fact regarding 143 scale cars is that even though they're so small, in most cases they're actually more detailed on the exterior than 124 scale cars, which I've been collecting for a long time. So even though 124 scale cars have lots of opening parts, the 143 scale is so popular because, first of all, there's so much to collect, and secondly, because in terms of exterior detail, they're really good. So let's take a closer look at this car. So here's a look at the front of the vehicle, and you can see that even though it is in 143 scale, AUTOart has made sure to replicate the Lotus logo on the hood, and it also says Turbo Esprit in gold lettering. This is a car from the 1980s era, which means it has those pop-up headlights, which look pretty cool, but one of the reasons why they died out is because of the new regulations for car manufacturers, which say that a headlight must be visible and on the body at all times. Now, as part of the front bumper, you can see that AUTOart has also created fog lamps out of a separate plastic piece. So they're not painted on, and they look pretty cool. This older gen Lotus Esprit Turbo had a more aggressive and boxy look compared to the Lotus Esprits that were made in the 1990s. And you can see the front air dam below the front bumper, and it looks pretty aggressive. And here's a look at the car's side profile, and just look at that angular awesomeness. This is 1980s design done right. You can see that AUTOart managed to include the side skirts with the air scoops. And over here at the back, you'll actually notice that this car has 2 fuel caps, as each side of this car has its own fuel tank. And the fuel caps look like actual openable caps as well. Now let's move on to the rims. These are 15-inch BBS alloy rims. And just look at the amount of amazing detail that AUTOart put into these rims. First of all, we have the Goodyear branding on the tire walls. We also have a nice reflective silver paint that make the rims stand out. But then just look at the amount of detail that AUTOart went into weaving these individual spokes together. And how they're bolted on to the rims with these individual little bolts is just amazing. Next to the wheels you have this little blinker here. And it's not just a sticker, it actually sticks out a little bit, which means it has that three-dimensional depth to it, which is good. And of course we have the golden stripes running along the sides of the car, as well as the Turbo Esprit logo on the back. The rear tires are also broader than the front ones, which is a nice little extra detail. And here's a look at the back of the car. No license plate for some reason. The taillights have some detail in them. You can see the different colors, but you can also see the pegs. I think they're supposed to be pegs. And another thing that I noticed is that the exhaust tips do not have holes in them. But come on, this is 143 scale. I mean, this car appears a lot larger in this video than it is in real life. What is nice, however, is that the rear bumper has the Lotus branding, and it is embossed and therefore has a three-dimensional effect to it. Moving further up, you can see the matte black rear slats. And unfortunately nothing opens on this car, but what I'd otherwise be able to show you here would be Lotus's proprietary engine, a 2.2-liter inline 4-cylinder with 210 horsepower, a top speed of 240 kilometers per hour, 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 6 seconds, the quarter mile in 14.4 seconds. Not very impressive, even for its era. One nice detail you can notice, however, is that this car has a rear lip spoiler, but it doesn't actually do anything, because there's another little bump over here you can see, right here. And AUTOart made sure to include it, so that's really nice. Basically what this does is it acts as the actual spoiler when the airflow goes from the front of the car all the way to the back. This was tested in the wind tunnel, and it worked, so this spoiler is just for visual purposes. Now, from what I've read, these taillights are actually from a Toyota AE86. So Lotus borrowed them from there. And the car does have some similarities to the Pontiac Fiero as well. And incidentally, its pop-up headlights are from the Fiero. Now let's move on to the interior, shall we? It's really hard to show you the interior of a 1/43 scale car where nothing opens. But AUTOart has managed to put plenty of detail in here, even for this scale. First of all, the interior is in a tan shade, which makes seeing things easier. Much easier, in fact. And AUTOart has managed to replicate the detail on the leather seats very well. I mean, you can see how plush and comfortable they look. This extends to the center console as well. And what you're looking at here is a 5-speed manual gearbox, which is coincidentally also the worst thing about this car, because I've heard that this car has a terrible gearbox. I think it was taken from a Renault from the 1980s or something. And here's a look at the driver's side. It's a right-hand drive car. It's really hard to see a lot of detail here, but the steering wheel's there, and that's about it. And here's a look at the door lock. You can see that AUTOart put a lot of detail into this as well. It almost feels like you can push it in and somehow open the door, but yeah. Still, it's a very nice piece. Alright guys, I hope you liked my review of the 1/43 scale Lotus Turbo Esprit by AUTOart. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.
Like you got sparks and shit coming out of your engine now. Okay. Bulldog?